And now I want to go to what FLFE has been doing with plants and crops. And you did a significant study out of Saskatchewan, as I recall. And I think it's also significant that it was during a drought, not the most advantageous conditions. Nonetheless, yes, studies are studies, and we have to see what you came up with. So tell us about the intention of that, because we teased it last time I talked to you. What actually happened? How many acres were involved in the control and FLFE, and what ended up coming out of that?
Well, yes, it was a drought year. I checked with the farmer; they were not irrigating that field.
That's what I was wondering. It's a little different in Canada.
In the North American Drought Monitor, if you go to that, you can see where the farm was located in 2021, and it was in moderate drought, what they called moderate drought. So it wasn't severe drought, but it was still what they considered a drought. The farmer that we worked with is an FLFE subscriber. Again, we see things seem to come from the subscribers. He wanted to put the service on his entire property. We said, well, hey, let's do a study. And what we're looking for, and I'll put a plug in, we'd love to find more farmers, organic farmers. We're only working with organic farmers who would like to do a study with us. And what was really significant about this farm was they had the equipment that could tell us by acre what the yield was of the plant. So we had relatively large control area and then an FLFE area that was smaller that we broke it down into sections so that we could get enough data for Gary to do a statistical analysis. And we were able to get a high level of, I'll let you talk about the statistics of it, Gary, but we were able to get an average of over 22% increase in yield in a moderate drought year.
And that was just one of the stats, because you also had increase in the foliage and the leafing and the depth of the roots, which was statistically fabulous. So Gary, let's talk about that.
Well, these are actually multiple studies. What's important, for example, about both the leaf study, the root study, and this Wicker Farm study, is that they were all done blind, so that the farmer didn't know which part of the field, if I remember correctly, and of course in the plant studies, people were running the experiments didn't know which particular housing of the plants was receiving the FLFE or not.
Right. Which
is essential if you're going to draw conclusions. And still under those, more rigid, what I call phase 2 kinds of experiments, clear statistical significance in these studies emerged. And, one of the things we don't typically attribute placebo effects to plants. Now, granted, plants may very well, of course, have consciousness, and so they may pick out some things from us in a paranormal sense, and of course, our consciousness. But the point is that it tells us this is not just a simple, quote, experimenter effect. It's not just sort of a belief. The same issue even goes back to the customer experience survey, because what we found was that 2/3 of this large sample, over 300 people, 2/3 of these people reported that the effects of FLFE were greater than they expected. And they simultaneously reported the greatest degree of benefits. So again, it's not a simple expectancy effect. It's not a simple placebo effect. There's something real going on here, and that's to be celebrated.
Absolutely. And 22% in terms of crop yield is very significant. If every farm, and no less organically in a drought year. I love that. Now I have a question to ask you. I have an unbearable problem with crabgrass the last few years. Is FLFE doing that? Is it possible? I have never seen such wicked amount and depth of roots. And I know they have the taproot that goes to hell, they say, but there's nothing we can do to get rid of the amount of crabgrass on this.
Wait, I have to ask a question. Is it your sense that there's more or less water? Are there any other variables that you're aware of that might explain this?
No,
Okay.
and it's the last few years, it's just been,
Do you know what the definition of a weed is?
What?
The definition of a weed is a plant that you don't like. That's what the definition of a weed is. But plants are plants. And so I would hope, all things being equal, that Fluffy would be able to nourish almost anything that was natural and that could, be part of the ecology. The fact that we don't like it in our gardens, I think that's, less.
It didn't occur to me till just now that might be why it's so darn healthy. But, in some places in the world, it's called Bermuda grass and people just shave it off and call it a yard. But when it's choking out all your other pretty plants, anyway,
of course,
it occurred to me that might be why it's so hardy. But let's talk about what people kind of anecdotally are experiencing in terms of their gardens, in terms of, I know flower freshness. A lot of people comment on the fact that even their cut flowers seem to last quite a long time. So what are you hearing about plants on the domestic front?
Well, the plant experiments are done with standard FLFE, which is what we see from customers, but also we have an experimental enhanced FLFE for plants, which was used in the study, in several of the studies that we have. What customers are saying is there a noticeable difference before and after of plant growth. And for me, I see our orchids. I used to have just, I guess, I don't know, a brown thumb in regards to orchids. I would buy an orchid, it would last some amount of time, and then it would just be a stick, right, for the foreseeable future. And now we have a whole wall of orchids that continually bloom. I mean, they lose their bloom, a new one comes. I mean, literally, there's just maybe a week in between or two. And my neighbor who walks his dog up and down the street has got a south-facing window full of orchids like ours. And he keeps saying, why aren't my orchids blooming like your orchids? We're both watering the same amount. We told him just water, 1 cup, or just, we have a little thimbleful that we do each plant each week. Mm-hmm. He's doing the exact same thing, and he's not getting the orchid blooms that we are.
Cool. So you can capitalize on those Trader Joe's inexpensive orchids and create a whole wall of them, I guess. That's very cool. Hey, thanks for sharing that. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you might also want to consider joining Patreon, which allows me to keep all of this content free and available to everyone. And if you're looking for like-minded souls, you might also enjoy my online community called Our Neighborhood. Links to join are in the description.